just for a second, the absolute shock of being suddenly dropped right into the heart of the untouched wilderness. There's no phone, absolutely no map, and no shelter. It's literally just you, the wind, and this profound, almost deafening silence. In today's Explainer, we're embarking on a fascinating dual journey. We're going to explore not just the gritty physical mechanics of keeping your body alive out there, but also the incredible psychological transformation that happens when the human mind is forced into extreme isolation. So let's dive right in.
Now, this brings us to the ultimate question of wilderness survival. What actually kills you first? Is it the biting wind or the blazing sun that poses the biggest immediate threat? Or is it the neurobiological reality of sheer, unchecked panic? As you'll see, the environment is definitely unforgiving, but it's actually your brain's reaction to that unwanted disconnection that usually seals your fate way before the elements even get a chance.
Section 1. The ticking survival clock.
To survive, you really have to understand your biological timeline. It's often called the rule of threes. Basically, you have about 3 minutes without breathable air. In a really harsh environment, think extreme heat or freezing cold, you have just 3 hours without shelter. Then you've got roughly 3 days without drinkable water and about 3 weeks without food. That right there is the literal ticking clock of your physical survival.
But here is the crazy part. While that physical clock is ticking down, your brain is doing something equally dangerous. It turns out your body doesn't actually distinguish between a physical threat, like a predator chasing you, and a social one, like sudden, terrifying isolation. That unwanted disconnection triggers your HPA axis, which completely floods your system with the stress hormone cortisol. Your brain is literally treating isolation like a physical injury, lighting up the exact same pain regions. You are, in a very real sense, bleeding out psychologically.
Section 2. Shelter from the storm.
So, the absolute fastest way to die in the wild is from exposure, just losing body heat through radiation, convection, and conduction. The ultimate fix for this is building a debris hut, but let me tell you, you need a massive amount of material. You start by setting up this sturdy 9-foot ridgepole. Then you construct a ribbed A-frame skeleton all around it. And then comes the truly heavy lifting. You have to gather and pack 2 to 3 feet of dead leaves or pine needles on the outside just to create a dead airspace. It is intense, utterly grueling physical labor.
And you really need to remember this crucial, often fatal reality. The cold ground will kill you way faster than the cold air. A lot of beginners put all their focus on the roof, but conduction, which is the heat literally being sucked right out of you by the earth, is deadly. You have to have at least 12 inches of compressed bedding inside your hut to create a thermal barrier between your body and the ground.
But here's the fascinating psychological mirror to all that intense physical labor. Building this hut, it isn't just about staying warm. It's actually the very first step in saving your mind. By taking deliberate, constructive action, your brain finally begins to shift out of that crippling panic mode. Every single stick you place, every handful of leaves you gather, it helps reestablish a sense of agency and control. You're telling your brain, hey, I've got this, and the panic starts to recede.
Section 3. The labor of hydration.
Finding water often highlights this incredibly poetic contrast in survival. Sometimes getting it requires really harsh, violent action. Say you're on a tropical island. You might find coconuts, which are amazing because they can hold up to 500 milliliters of life-saving water. But how do you get inside without tools? Well, you have to find a sharp, hard-edged rock and then repeatedly slam the coconut's equator against it, rotating and striking with sheer, brute physical force until it finally cracks. It's loud, it's exhausting, and it is entirely primal. But that violent energy contrasts so sharply with a completely different survival mindset. Because if there are no coconuts, you might have to build a solar still. You dig a hole, you place the container inside, cover the whole thing with plastic, and weigh it down with a rock in the center. And then, you just wait. You're harnessing the sun's heat to evaporate ground moisture, watching agonizingly as condensation forms, drop by tiny drop into your cup. This method requires utter stillness, quiet, and a truly meditative patience.
Section 4. Harvesting the wild.
When it comes to foraging and hunting, you have to merge completely with your environment. You might have to resort to hand fishing, literally reaching blindly into murky, muddy waters hoping to grab a catfish. Or maybe you spend hours fashioning a gorge hook from a tiny bone shard, waiting patiently for a fish to swallow it whole. And if you're using a spear, you have to master the physics of the water on the fly, remembering to aim below the fish just to compensate for light refraction.
But we can't forget, the wild is incredibly unforgiving. Foraging comes with some really deadly risks, and you absolutely must know what to avoid. Fish with bristles, spines, or ones missing normal scales, like the puffer or the stonefish, can be highly poisonous. Survival out there demands an absolute unwavering hyper-awareness of your surroundings at all times.
Section 5. Isolation versus solitude.
Now, once that fire is finally burning and your thirst is quenched, a really stark line gets drawn in your mind. Remember how isolation is unwanted disconnection? It keeps you trapped in this toxic fight or flight mode. But when you start to actually master your environment, that fear begins to fade. You begin to intentionally choose to be there. Isolation suddenly transforms into solitude. And solitude? That activates the parasympathetic nervous system, bringing your whole body into a state of rest and digest. Just let that sink in for a moment. When the panic finally stops, this biological miracle happens. Your parasympathetic nervous system completely takes over. Your heart rate noticeably slows down. Your breathing deepens. All that incredible muscle tension you've been holding on to just releases. Your mind fundamentally shifts its entire operating mode from frantic, desperate survival to this place of profound, grounded calm.
And in this newly quiet state, the mind actually begins to repair itself. Your brainwaves slow down, shifting from the rapid beta waves of anxious, racing thoughts into these relaxed alpha waves, which is essentially a state of calm alertness. Those toxic cortisol levels just plummet. And, brilliantly, your brain activates what's called the default mode network. This is the system that processes our experiences, consolidates our memories, and really fosters deep creativity. Out there in the sheer silence of the wild, your mind is basically doing a hard reset, healing and organizing itself.
Section 6. The ultimate survival tool.
So we started this explainer with the harsh, brutal realities of building debris huts and literally smashing coconuts against rocks. But as you adapt, this amazing, almost poetic transformation occurs. The grueling physical reality of the wilderness seamlessly merges with the restorative internal landscape of your mind. The rhythmic, repetitive labor of tending a fire or weaving a fish trap actually becomes a living, breathing meditation. What began as the terrifying sheer panic of being isolated has ultimately transformed into a state of profound, peaceful self-discovery.
Which leaves us with this final lingering thought. Survival really isn't just about enduring the elements out there. It is entirely about enduring yourself. If you were stripped of every modern distraction, once that shelter was perfectly built and the water was finely boiled, how would your mind handle the deep silence of the wild? Would you break under the weight of the isolation, or would you discover the incredible, restorative power of true solitude? Definitely something to think about the next time you find yourself entirely alone.